One of the greatest feelings in Rust is waking up and seeing your base intact, knowing it's time to pick up where you left off and continue the fight for your space on the map. This is part 2 and the final half of my solo wipe. If you haven't already watched the first one, there'll be a link in the description below. I logged off for the night with my base built and upgraded, with kits and weapons in my boxes, and having ended the night obtaining a blue card, with my main task for the morning being oil rig. But first, it's time for some early hours farming. I began by running some chores, farming some nodes, getting my furnaces going and doing some recycling. All was quiet on the server for now, but I did notice a new neighbour close by who had a campfire burning. It's always good when logging back on to check the map for any good deals for items you may be missing. For me, I can never help myself when I see an MP5 and decided I'd take enough sulphur for 2. Annoyingly, this was another shop that failed to mention it was drone only. Once I saw the compound, I headed to Outpost and purchased the 2 MP5s remotely. On my travels to and from Outpost, as I was unmolested picking up the MP5, I thought I'd take advantage of the safe passage and trade some of the stone I had for wood just to keep my furnaces going all day. It was only a matter of time before I was introduced to my new neighbour. I did try to go over to his base and make peace. Hey man, my bad, we live quite close if you want to be friendly. Yeah, I'm over here, I'm your neighbour. Whoa, okay, that's how it's going to be. Okay. Unfortunately for him, he either didn't have voices on or was just unreasonably hostile. I'm sad to say this was the last time I saw him online, and I did feel bad for the briefest of moments. With that distraction gone, I got back to the task of running power and grabbing myself a red card. The trip was uneventful, but I managed to get the card I needed and even found a python along the way, and now I was ready for oil. crafted a kit during night, and when morning came I heard an airdrop overhead and decided I'd go and see if I could either find where the airdrop was or find a boat that I could use for oil. Luckily I managed to head in the right direction and eventually spotted the airdrop falling on an island. With an MP5 and 2 satchels, I was happy about the loot. I currently had no raiding equipment learned on the server, and with these I could learn one satchel and recycle the other for the bean can BP. Once I got back and depoted the airdrop loot, I decided there was no time like the present and I got to work finishing up a kit to take to oil rig, and even bubbled up some low grade using one of the 2 refineries at power. I managed to find a boat on a beach fairly close to my base, but while heading out I got to see all of the very large and hostile looking bases lining the coast. The whole run went pretty smooth, and I was picking up a whole bunch of gun bodies and scrap that I needed. However, when it got to the heavies, a mixture of me underestimating the amount of ammo I would actually need, and the fact I got absolutely melted by a heavy that took me from 71 health to 0 in a second and a half, I ended up dying. I waited to see if I'd stand back up, but when that didn't happen, I got to gearing up with a new kit and heading back. All in all, it only took about 5 minutes to re-kit and be back on a boat heading to Oil Rig. I did notice though that the base that had looked empty now had some furnaces going. I fully expected to die as I went past. I would never say that I'm some sort of oil rig chad, but these heavies were messing me up way more than normal, and me getting stuck on every object possible wasn't helping. And while running away from a heavy, that's when I heard the sound of a boat arriving. I was gutted, and I even let a bit of salt out into chat even though I was the one who whiffed my spray. I was just curious if he did in fact follow me from the large furnace base. With no more boats, no low grade, no meds, and only a few ready kits in the base, attempting another return to oil wasn't really an option, and I had to cut my losses. Instead I chose to roam and try and warm up my PvP a bit, but first I was going to need to top up my low grade and my med supplies. I initially wanted to go to Junkyard and farm the monument and the surrounding road for low grade, but having spotted a roof camper and some antics happening with a group on the beach, I headed back to power and decided I'd just run the pump jack. With 7 low grade, the goal was to get to about 400 by turning the low grade into crude oil, and then refining that crude into triple the amount of low grade I started with. I would then continue this for about 20 minutes, leaving low grade running in the pump jack and making runs to and from the bubblers in my base. eventually getting into a bit of a rotation before ending up with nearly 400 low grade, but deciding to leave when I had a few other players arrive at the monument. With the low grade sorted and the meds crafted, I checked the map and saw that the lock crate had been dropped at train yard, so off I went. Unexpectedly, after breaking my legs falling down a drop I couldn't even see, I ended up being perfectly lined up with the silhouette of a player ahead of me. I had no idea he'd be quite so stacked, and it was almost certainly a bigger haul than if I'd hit the lock crate. I still wanted to roam and get into some fights that I missed out on from the lock crate, so I headed over to train yard to see if there was any action left in the area. Sure enough, as soon as I got close, I could hear some shots at train yard. As he didn't hear my first shots, I realised he most likely didn't know where he'd been shot from, and I was convinced that he'd dropped down and gone into the tunnel on the other side of the train. This meant that he was most likely going to come out right in front of me, as this was the only exit to that tunnel. I pulled back to the cargo container and held the ladder that came up. I chilled out in my base for a bit, and while I'm no raider with this much sulphur in my boxes, I thought I'd craft what I had into satchels and see how many doors deep I could raid. I'd seen a few of my neighbours' bases looking juicy, including one directly north of my base, believing it was probably about 4 doors to some sort of loot, so I got to crafting the sulphur into bean cans and those into satchels. I needed about 8k sulphur to get 16 satchels, so in between crafting I went out with the jacket to farm up the additional nodes I needed. With the satchels now crafted and some backup kits prepared in case of a counter, I grabbed the first stack of 8 satchels and went north. The first 2 doors went fine, opening up onto the airlock, and with no sign of counters I dipped back to base to pick up more satchels. While raiding the airlock, it quickly became apparent that the furnaces were not going to survive, and with the last satchel stuck to the door, the hope was to pick it up and dip back to base to craft ladders. That didn't happen and the satchel went off, but the plan was still the same. I hadn't heard this guy arrive at all. I re-kitted quickly and hoped to get back to him while he was still looting me. However, he actually went ahead and used my satchels to continue the raid. I don't think he realised that the jump up was gone, so while I was outgunned, I pushed the base fairly hard, hoping that he was going to be stuck somewhere. I hesitated about jumping down, but after I could hear flies, I knew what he'd done. He'd F1 in the hopes of coming back with ladders, and as he still didn't know how far away I lived or that I'd come back at all, I decided to take his AK and hold the door. Moments later, I heard him almost crash land his mini. So yeah, that really did happen. I accidentally hit my suicide key, but with an outside bag it didn't really change much, and I was able to come back to the raid, grab all the loot and leave using his ladders. base wasn't completely open yet and I had some sulfur left over in my base, so I went and crafted up another 4 satchels to see if I could still win the raid. Luckily this was the last door, and with an extra bean can and some 5.56, I got the TC destroyed and placed my own. Also, while I went through their boxes and collected the best of their loot, I also recognised some of the names of the base owners. Not wanting to risk encountering the guy again, I placed my own TC, further sealed up and logged off for a while in my new base. The rest of the wipe was fun, but as friends came on to join me, this raid was the end to my solo wipe. I've had a lot of fun making these wipe videos and I hope you've enjoyed them too. I really do appreciate the support from you all, as it only motivates me more. If you did enjoy the wipe, please consider liking, commenting and sharing the video, and if you're not already, a sub would go a long way too. Thanks so much for watching.